Picture this: a single, fragile moth dancing in the beam of a lantern, its wings catching the light like a secret whispered in the dark. That's how I felt, standing at the edge of the Elderglow Botanical Garden, waiting for something I couldn't yet name. My name's Hannah, 28 years old. A woman who thought she knew the shape of her life until tonight started to unravel it. I've been married to Jonathan for 5 years now, a man in his early 30s who carries a quiet mystery in his eyes, a depth I've always tried to dive into but never quite reached. He's thoughtful, always planning little ways to pull me closer when the distance between us grows too wide. Our love is real, but sometimes it feels like we're speaking different languages, orbiting each other in a dance of near misses. Just last week, Jonathan surprised me with something unexpected. A private nighttime tour of this very garden, a sprawling sanctuary of rare plants and hidden paths just beyond the city's edge. Elderglow isn't just a place. It's a living, breathing maze of beauty, a world apart from the concrete and noise we're used to. I was thrilled when he told me about it, picturing us walking hand in hand under the stars. I spent hours getting ready, slipping into a flowing navy dress that swished against my legs, tying my hair back loosely so the night breeze could play with it. I wanted to look like someone worth surprising, someone who could match the magic of the evening. But then, at the last moment, Jonathan's face clouded over. A work commitment, he said, something urgent he couldn't push aside. He insisted I go alone, promising he'd make it up to me. I tried to hide my disappointment, but as I drove to the garden, a tiny knot of frustration sat heavy in my chest. Why plan something so intimate if he couldn't be there to share it? When I arrived at the entrance, the dusk was settling like a velvet curtain over the world. That's when I met William, the tour guide assigned to lead me through this nocturnal wonderland. He was waiting by the wrought iron gate, a lantern glowing in his hand, casting sharp shadows across his face. Late 30s, I'd guess, with a rugged kind of handsomeness that caught me off guard. Broad shoulders under a worn jacket, sharp green eyes that seemed to see right through the polite smile I offered. His voice was a low hum, steady and warm, as he introduced himself and gestured for me to follow. There was a quiet intensity to him, a professionalism that bordered on something else, something I couldn't quite pin down. I shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, and wondered what stories those hands had to tell. The garden itself was a revelation. As we stepped past the gate, lanterns dotted along the path flickered with golden light, illuminating ancient trees whose gnarled branches twisted like they held centuries of secrets. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, and I felt myself slipping into a kind of trance as I walked beside William along the winding trails of Elderglow. The lanterns cast pools of warm, honeyed light against the shadowy foliage, creating a dreamlike glow that seemed to pull me deeper into this hidden world. Every step revealed something new, something breathtaking. Towering ferns arched overhead, their fronds brushing against my shoulder like a whispered greeting. Delicate orchids clung to mossy rocks, their petals so pale they almost looked like ghosts in the dim light. And then there were the moonflowers, their luminous blooms shimmering as if lit from within, unfurling under the soft illumination as though they'd been waiting just for us to pass by. I couldn't help but pause, reaching out to touch one, marveling at how it seemed to pulse with a quiet, secret life. William's voice was a steady companion through it all, low and measured, weaving stories about the garden's past with an ease that drew me in. He spoke of how these paths were once trodden by botanists and dreamers, people who sought solace in the wild beauty of this place centuries ago. He pointed out the unique properties of each plant, how the ferns could survive in near darkness, how the orchids adapted to whisper-thin air, how the moonflowers only revealed their glow under the cover of night. His knowledge was impressive, almost encyclopedic, but there was something oddly intimate in the way he shared it, as if he were confiding in me alone. I found myself hanging on his every word, caught between the enchantment of the garden and the strange pull of his presence. And yet, there was something about him that set my nerves on edge, a subtle tension I couldn't quite name. I noticed the small things, the way his fingers brushed against a leaf, with a tenderness that seemed personal, as if he knew each plant by heart, or how his gaze would linger on me a moment too long when he thought I wasn't looking, those sharp green eyes searching for something I wasn't sure I wanted to give. It was comforting, having him guide me through this unfamiliar world, but it was also unnerving, like walking a tightrope between trust and unease. My thoughts drifted to Jonathan, to why he'd chosen this specific experience for me. Why a nighttime tour, alone, in a place so steeped in mystery? I remembered a cryptic comment he'd made just before I left, his voice soft but weighted as he touched my hand and said, "Let the night breathe through you." What did he mean by that? Was it just a poetic way to wish me well? Or was there something more? Something he wanted me to uncover here? We came to a small pond nestled in a clearing, its still surface reflecting the lantern light like a perfect mirror, doubling the golden glow around us. I stopped, caught by the beauty of it, the way the water seemed to hold the night itself in its depths. William paused beside me, his shadow stretching long across the ground. He turned to me with a faint smile, and in that moment, I felt the air shift, like the garden itself was holding its breath. William's smile faded into something deeper, something I couldn't quite read, and he gestured toward a narrower path veering off to the right. He said it led to a special place, a hidden gem even most visitors never saw. My curiosity piqued. I nodded, following him as the trail grew tighter, the lantern light dimming with every step as the trees closed in around us. The sounds of the night seemed to amplify, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. My heart was beating a little faster, though I couldn't tell if it was from the thrill of the unknown or the way William's presence seemed to fill the space between us, heavy and unspoken. After a few minutes, the path opened into a small clearing, and I stopped short, overwhelmed by the sight before me. It was a jasmine grove, a secluded sanctuary surrounded by trellises draped in white blooms, their petals glowing faintly under the silvery mix of moonlight and the faint flicker of lanterns hung sporadically among the vines. The scent hit me like a wave, so potent it felt like a physical weight pressing against my skin, sweet and heady, almost suffocating in its intensity. I stood there, breathing it in, feeling it wrap around me like a veil, and for a moment, the world seemed to blur at the edges, dreamlike and unreal. William stopped walking just ahead of me, turning to face me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Intense, searching, almost raw. The dim light cast shadows across his face, making his green eyes look darker, deeper, like they held something I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. My pulse quickened as he took a step closer, closing the small distance between us. I could feel the warmth of him, the subtle scent of earth and leather mixing with the jasmine, and then his hand reached out. His fingers brushed along the side of my neck, so light it was barely a touch. Yet it sent a shiver racing down my spine, electric and unbidden. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. As he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, his voice was a whisper, low and deliberate, each word sinking into me like a stone dropped into still water. Jonathan wanted you to feel a different breath of the night. My mind reeled, the words echoing in my head as I tried to grasp their meaning. Jonathan? My husband had orchestrated this? Had somehow intended for me to be here, in this moment? With William? Shock rooted me to the spot, my thoughts a tangled mess. But beneath it, there was something else. A forbidden heat, a pull I couldn't deny, sparked by William's touch and the intoxicating haze of jasmine that seemed to cloud my judgment. My loyalty to Jonathan screamed at me to step back, to demand answers, to run from this moment before it spiraled further. But another part of me, quieter yet insistent, craved the danger of it, the thrill of the unknown, the way William's gaze held mine like I was the only thing in the world that mattered right then. I was torn, caught in a storm of conflict, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might betray me. And then, in a moment of weakness, I let go. I gave in, leaning into him as his lips found mine, the kiss slow at first, tentative, then deepening with a hunger that felt both wrong and inevitable. My hands slid up to his shoulders, gripping the rough fabric of his jacket as the world narrowed to the sensation of him, the taste of betrayal mingling with the sweetness of jasmine on the air. It was like drowning in a current I couldn't fight. Every rational thought swept away by the heat of it, the way his hands pressed against my back, pulling me closer as if he'd been waiting for this, just as much as I hadn't known I was. But then, just as quickly as it began, I pulled back, breathless, my chest heaving as reality crashed over me. What had I done? Guilt clawed at my insides, sharp and unrelenting, and I opened my eyes, trying to steady myself, to find some anchor in the chaos of my emotions. My hands were trembling as I stepped back from William, the space between us suddenly feeling like a chasm I couldn't cross again. The jasmine scent, once so enchanting, now pressed against me like a heavy fog, suffocating and cloying, making it hard to think straight. The moonlight streaming through the trellises seemed too harsh, too revealing, casting jagged shadows across the clearing that felt like they were slicing into my very soul. I couldn't look at William, couldn't face the weight of what had just happened, so I turned my head, desperate for a moment to breathe, to process. That's when I saw him. Jonathan, my husband, standing at the far edge of the clearing, half hidden by the shadow of a towering vine-covered arch, his figure unmistakable even in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp, painful gasp as our eyes locked across the distance. His gaze was piercing, unreadable, pinning me in place as if I were a specimen under glass. My heart, already racing from the kiss, now thundered with a different kind of panic. How long had he been there? Had he seen everything? The questions churned in my mind, each one sharper than the last, cutting through the haze of guilt and confusion. Jonathan didn't move at first, his posture deceptively casual, one hand tucked into the pocket of his dark coat, the other hanging loosely at his side. But there was nothing relaxed about the way he stood, nothing casual about the faint smirk playing on his lips. That smirk, it sent a wave of unease crashing through me, cold and heavy, settling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't anger I saw there, or hurt, but something else, something calculated, as if he'd expected this, as if he'd been waiting for it. My mind spiraled, racing through possibilities I couldn't grasp. Had he planned this moment? Was this some kind of twisted test of my loyalty, a game to see how far I'd stray? Or was there something deeper at play, something I couldn't yet understand, something that had been simmering beneath the surface of our marriage all along? Beside me, William remained silent, his presence a quiet weight I could still feel even without looking at him. His expression when I dared a quick glance was neutral, almost detached, as if he were merely an observer now, waiting to see how this would unfold. Was he in on this too? Had he known Jonathan would show up? The uncertainty gnawed at me, amplifying the tension that hung in the air like a storm about to break. I wanted to say something to William, to demand an explanation, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. My focus pulled inexorably back to my husband. I took a hesitant step forward, away from William, toward Jonathan, my legs unsteady beneath me. My hands were still shaking, and I clenched them into fists at my sides, trying to hide the tremor. My voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper, fragile and raw, as if speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile balance remained in this moment. "Why are you here?" I asked, the words trembling as much as my hands, carrying all the confusion and dread I felt. Jonathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he began to walk toward us, his movements slow and deliberate, each step measured as if he were savoring the weight of the silence between us. The gravel path crunched under his boots, the sound sharp and grating in the stillness of the night, each echo amplifying the dread coiling tighter in my chest. My eyes tracked his approach, unable to look away, as the distance between us shrank. The moonlight caught the planes of his face as he drew closer, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the depth of his eyes, and that smirk. It hadn't faded. If anything, it seemed to grow, subtle but undeniable, a silent challenge I didn't know how to meet. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I could see the faintest glint of something in his gaze. Amusement, perhaps, or something darker, something I couldn't name. The tension was a living thing, wrapping around us in the jasmine grove, thick and unyielding. I stood there, frozen, my breath shallow, as Jonathan's eyes bore into mine. The lanterns flickered erratically, their golden light dancing across his face, mirroring the chaos storming inside me. My heart was a wild drum in my chest, each beat echoing the questions I'd already asked, the fears I couldn't voice. I felt exposed, stripped bare under his gaze, as if he could see every thought, every conflicting emotion tearing me apart after what I'd just done with William. Why? I managed to choke out again, my voice cracking like brittle glass. Why are you here, Jonathan? Why did you set this up? Did you watch everything? The words tumbled out, raw and desperate, each one heavier than the last. I needed answers, needed to understand why my husband had orchestrated this night, why he'd let me walk into this moment of betrayal. What do you want from me now? My voice rose, trembling with a mix of anger and vulnerability, as I took a shaky step closer to him. The scent of jasmine still clinging to my skin like a guilty reminder. Jonathan didn't flinch. He stepped forward, closing the remaining distance between us, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the grove. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and deliberate, each word chosen with a precision that cut through the haze in my mind. "Hannah, I've always seen it in you," he said, his eyes never leaving mine, searching, piercing. "A part of you that's restless, craving something more, something wild that I couldn't give you myself. I've felt it in the silences between us, in the way you sometimes look past me, like you're searching for a horizon I can't reach." I blinked, stunned, my breath catching as his words sank in. My mind raced back over our years together, the quiet moments of disconnect, the times I'd felt an ache I couldn't name. Had he really seen that in me? Had I been so transparent, even when I hadn't fully understood it myself? I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down, a part of me knew there was truth in what he was saying. Still, that didn't explain this, didn't justify what had happened tonight. He continued, his tone steady, almost confessional. "I arranged this with William. He's a friend, someone I trust. I wanted you to have this night, to explore that side of yourself, to feel alive in a way I thought you needed. I couldn't be the one to give you that fire, but I could give you the chance to find it." His words hung in the air, heavy with intention, and I felt the ground shift beneath me, like the very earth of the garden was tilting out of balance. Shock hit me first, a cold wave that numbed my fingertips and made my knees weak. He'd planned this? He'd deliberately put me in William's path, knowing, hoping, that something like this would happen? My thoughts spun, a whirlwind of disbelief and betrayal. Anger followed, hot and sharp, burning through the numbness. "You manipulated me," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "You played with my emotions, with our marriage, like it was some kind of experiment. How could you do this to me, Jonathan? How could you stand there and watch while I couldn't finish the sentence, the memory of William's kiss flashing through my mind. the guilt and thrill of it twisting together in a knot I couldn't untangle. But beneath the anger, there was something else, something more confusing. A flicker of gratitude, unbidden and unwanted, for the intensity I'd felt in that forbidden moment. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't deny it. I'd felt alive, more alive than I had in years, caught in the rush of something dangerous and new. My eyes dropped to the ground, unable to meet Jonathan's gaze as I wrestled with the truth of my own feelings. I liked it, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, the confession spilling out before I could stop it. The words hung there, fragile and damning, in the thick air of the jasmine grove. I felt Jonathan's gaze on me, steady and unyielding, but I couldn't bring myself to look up. My heart was a tangled mess of shame and defiance, and I didn't know how to face him after admitting something so raw, so true. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating, until I heard the soft crunch of gravel as he shifted closer. Then his hand reached for mine, his fingers warm and familiar, yet somehow different now, weighted with everything that had just transpired. "Come with me," he said, his voice softer now, almost tender, but still carrying that undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. I hesitated, my breath catching as I finally lifted my eyes to meet his. There was no judgment there, no anger, just a quiet intensity that made my chest ache. I nodded, unable to speak, and let him guide me away from the clearing, away from William, who stood silently behind us, his presence fading into the shadows like a ghost of the moment I couldn't erase. We walked back through the garden, the path winding under the ancient trees, the lanterns now dimming as the night deepened into something heavier, more intimate. The golden glow that had once felt so magical was now a faint flicker, casting long, wavering shadows across the ground. The air was cooler now, brushing against my skin, but the scent of jasmine still clung to me, lingering like a memory I couldn't shake, a reminder of the line I'd crossed. My navy dress swished softly with each step, the fabric catching the last traces of light, and I felt exposed, as if the garden itself could see the turmoil churning inside me. Jonathan's hand stayed in mine, his grip firm but not tight, a silent anchor in the storm of my thoughts. As we moved through the maze of paths, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. My mind replayed the night in fragments, the way the moonflowers had glowed like tiny moons, the steady cadence of William's voice weaving stories of the garden's past, the electric shiver of his touch, and then the gut-wrenching moment I saw Jonathan watching from the shadows. I thought about his words, how he'd seen a restlessness in me I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. And I realized, with a clarity that both scared and exhilarated me, that I had changed tonight. There was a part of me that had awakened, a hunger for experiences I never knew I wanted, a yearning for something beyond the safe, predictable edges of my life. I'd always thought of myself as content, as someone who knew her place in the world, but now I wasn't so sure. The taste of something forbidden had ignited a spark, and I didn't know if I could, or even wanted to, put it out. We reached the garden's entrance, the wrought iron gate looming ahead, its intricate patterns barely visible in the fading light. Jonathan stopped, and so did I, the silence between us settling like a heavy fog. I turned to look at him, searching his face for answers I wasn't sure I'd find. His eyes were softer now, but still deep with unspoken thoughts, and I felt a pang of uncertainty. What did this mean for us? Could we go back to the way things were, to the quiet routines and comfortable silences of our marriage? Or had tonight shattered that possibility forever? I opened my mouth to ask, my voice trembling with the weight of the question. Can we just go back to how it was before? Jonathan's gaze held mine for a long moment, and then he squeezed my hand, a gesture both comforting and heavy with meaning I couldn't fully grasp. His lips curved into a faint, almost wistful smile, and he replied softly, "Maybe we don't have to." His words hung in the air, simple yet loaded, like a door creaking open to a room I'd never explored. My heart stuttered, caught between fear and a strange, thrilling excitement. Fear of what this meant for our future, of the uncharted territory we might be stepping into, but also excitement at the unknown, at the possibility that this new path could lead us to a place more beautiful and fulfilling than we ever imagined. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.